So tell me, as we get set to start this session, how many of those who are here at Mindrocks 18 know of and shop at Myntra or Jabong?
Fabulous.
See, when you've got the chief executive of the company here and you've got so many hands going up, that's about the best endorsement for a relatively new brand and yet huge recall. That just shows how quickly online shopping is developing, and that must be a good thing, to have such young people, all of them say, yeah, we know the brand and we even shop here.
Rahul, I only saw 70% of the hands go up. Hopefully by the end of this session, 100% of you will actually be shopping on Myntra.
See, that's one of the things about being a chief executive. He's always saying, okay, we've got 70% of the market covered. Can we try and get the rest of the 30% as well? One of the things that Myntra is doing, and which seems really exciting and which could possibly redefine how people shop and how companies design, is the use of artificial intelligence in design. So why don't you tell us about Moda Rapido, right?
Yep.
And how you're using machine learning and artificial intelligence to figure out what all these people sitting here should wear.
Yeah. So this was quite exciting. About 3 years ago, we said, since we're an online brand, can we actually find out, and we have so much data around what consumers like, don't like, what they've browsed, can we actually really use this data to actually design clothes using a machine as opposed to designers? So that's how the idea started. What's changed is, we can now take a picture of you, Rahul, and basically say, this is the kind of shirt you're wearing, the blue trousers, hopefully you've bought them from Myntra too. All of these, I think, the machine can now pick up. So we then know the trend. Once you know the trend, what we do is we quickly get it manufactured in 45 days and actually sell it online. So this brand, by the way, this year will do something like 200 crores in revenue, right? And it has 4 engineers and 6 product managers, and that's it. And the brand does very well because it actually is able to predict what people want. And we are able to manufacture it very, very quickly. And so there's almost no wastage.
Now you're getting big international brands chasing you, wanting the technology to be able to use artificial intelligence for designing clothes?
Yes. So multiple global brands are talking to us to say, can we use this technology so that we all actually are able to produce clothes? The problem in fashion typically is, in a season, when you start something, about 60% sells and 40% actually doesn't sell because you've got it wrong. If you change that ratio to 80-20, then the economics change. That's why all the big brands are after us.
Isn't that a bit of a rip-off, Ananth? You're basically seeing the creative talents and pursuits of designers, doing a bit of a bapilleri on them, copying them and selling them online.
So every designer today, Rahul, actually looks for inspiration. Okay, they go to London, they go to New York, they go to various trends and look for inspiration, right? Actually, what we're doing is bringing that inspiration, distilling it down to here are the 5 things that work and 5 things that don't work. So in my mind, we're making the actual job of the designer more effective. So they can really focus on creativity and they don't have to worry about all the trends.
Okay, so tell us, what are the fashion trends this season? You got a lot of young people here, all of whom wanting to be fashionable. What are the kind of things they should be looking out for?
So one thing which has become big, 2 things actually. One is sustainable fashion. So people are now looking more and more for clothes that are actually made such that it doesn't damage the environment. One of the things we have done is, in a brand of ours called Roadster, we have reduced water usage by 70% in how denim actually does, and it's actually more expensive. But people are willing to pay a 10-20% premium to buy that. So sustainable fashion is one big thing. The second is actually athleisure. So people are using sports clothes with a fashion flair, and they're using it all the time. So one of our brands with Bollywood star Hrithik Roshan is actually in this space and is growing at 200% year on year. Right? So athleisure is another thing that I think people really like because sports, comfort, and fashion are all coming together.
That's something you've done quite smartly, where you've got Bollywood stars involved as entrepreneurs, and they're partnering with you. But is the partnership for real? Do they actually help design the clothes, or is it just their face on the ad?
No, we have 2 big Bollywood brands. One is called All About You with Deepika Padukone, and another one is HRX with Hrithik Roshan. Both of them actually have equity in the brand. They are invested in this for the long term. So they actually get involved in the design process. They actually get involved in saying, is this representative of me? So it's actually quite nice. So in fact, unlike a typical endorsement deal, here you have to actually hold them back because they actually are wearing the brand all the time. They're talking about the brand all the time because it's their brand, right?
And you get them for free.
And we get them for not quite free, but for a good deal.
But that's what startups do differently from established brands. They're thinking differently, innovating constantly, and therefore able to strike a deal which sounds simple enough and fairly obvious, but wasn't done before this.
Yeah. So my sense is, I think as a startup, when you see an opportunity, you just don't stop till you get at it. I think that's probably the single biggest difference between a regular organization and a startup, right?
So I asked when we were starting out, how many people wanted to be entrepreneurs? Can I ask that same question? How many people here want to, when either now or a couple of years later, be their own boss, not work for anybody, but do their own thing? That's a lot
That's
of
quite
hands.
a lot of people, yeah.
When I may have been of this age and we'd asked people the same question, very few hands would have gone up. So that's really a completely new India that's in the making.
Yeah.
What tips do you have for them? What does it take to make a startup tick?
I think the first is optimism. So you have to be, as you start something, things are always difficult. You're creating something brand new. So the first thing you need is lots and lots of optimism to make sure that any time, whether it's difficult times, easy times, you're the sort of torchbearer for the entire company, right? So optimism is really important. The second, what I heard from a friend of mine is called actually luck, and you need a lot of it. But the twist in luck is the more number of times you try, the luckier you get. So you need perseverance. So you could knock on a door 99 times, and if you stop at the 99th time, you're unlucky. But if you try the 100th time, then you do get lucky, right? So the second big tip that I have for people is it's a lot about hard work and perseverance and making sure that you actually really go after it, right? And never stop. The third actually big one for me is enjoying the process. A lot of startups fail, some make it big, but you have to enjoy the process and you have to do it with people that you really like, right? So those are the big three for me.
Why is it that most startups in India, the ones that have succeeded, generally tend to be living off or leveraging the big retail market of India? Why don't we have, say, an Apple-like product,
Sure.
which is a technological disruption or way ahead in terms of what we offer as a product, vis-a-vis, all the products, with no disrespect for them, which are basically saying that, okay, there's a big Indian market, they're all offline, put them online and make money off it.
See, I think it's a problem of plenty, Rahul, right? Actually, India is a very large B2C market. Therefore, it's easy to do this. I actually had a chance to visit Israel recently, which is a very large tech ecosystem. But it's a very small B2C market, right? There are only 8 million people, which is much less than Delhi. So there you develop a lot more technology and B2B products because you have to serve the world in order to be big. In India, the temptation often is to actually serve a very large market because you can get big quickly. My advice for people who are actually starting out is going deep into a particular area and building a full stack product is a much better long-term solution. I think the risks and rewards are both much greater in going after the B2C market because everybody in the world wants to go after the B2C market. But if you take a narrow slice, go deep and build a company, I think there are many, many companies worth everything from few $100 million to a few $1 billion that are waiting to be made in India today. Over the next 10 years, this will happen.
So, you've shown an ability to stay one step ahead of the curve, do things which others in your industry weren't. So there's so many hands going up saying, okay, we want to be entrepreneurs. Where do you see the opportunity in the next 5 years?
So I would say at least 3-4 areas. I still think the consumer internet area, the B2C retail market that you talked about, there is still lots of areas for opportunity. I'll give you one. We have a program called the Brand Accelerator, where we take young entrepreneurs who have an idea about a brand, we partner with them, and we help them scale through distribution. So there are multiple brands which are going to be several $100 million that are going to be built out of India, right? Because India today in the fashion space is an unbranded market. So consumer internet space and brands will be one large area. I think health will be another one. Health and wellness. If you take that, apply a technology lens to it, could you build many businesses? Fitness, wellness, I think is a very large space that I think will continue to explode. I think the whole area of AI. Can you build deep analytics companies? I saw almost 40 companies in Israel that have built very specific products using AI. We have lots of engineering talent. I mean, here in this room, outside. How can we actually harness it to really build AI companies would be a third. And the last is redefining education, right? I think we are in an age where continuous learning is the only option, right? I think the 4-year college degree Again, no offense to anybody, the 4-year college degree is overrated. Because at the end of it, you actually have to keep learning. So how do you build businesses around education would be another area.
What is it, according to you, that differentiates a startup which was a great idea but which failed, vis-a-vis a startup which may have had many tumbles and fumbles as it got started, but ultimately came together like magic?
I think probably two things, capital and the team. So I think, especially in India, in the B2C space, you need a lot of capital to be able to succeed. So if you look at what my parent company Flipkart has done and others, actually it has been able to raise capital and therefore has been able to compete. The second is actually the team. The higher the quality of the team, I think the biggest difference is if you have a high quality team, you tumble through those problems and get up. Otherwise, you just tumble down. So I think both those actually are very important things for a startup to be successful.
So you mentioned Flipkart, which is interesting because there's a big battle looming between Flipkart and Amazon now. And everybody else is wondering, okay, so do I really have a chance or will I get edged out by these elephants and gorillas?
I think there's a lot of chance. My sense is there are multiple businesses being built around the e-commerce ecosystem. You can build companies in logistics. You can build companies in AI and analytics for each of these e-commerce businesses. You can build brands that the e-commerce companies will sell. So there is a lot of opportunity to build very large companies around the ecosystem that e-commerce is creating and retail is creating.
Is there a fear at Flipkart, even though you got lots of new money coming in, that in the end there'll be Amazon?
Not at all. I think the Flipkart group, which is Flipkart, Myntra, Jabong, PhonePe, I think we're very well positioned and I actually think we'll actually win in this market.
Why do you feel that way?
Great talent, of course, Rahul. No,
just the good team
yeah.
that helps you stumble team, right? And tumble and then
get up.
Get up and run. Okay, no, so I want to talk to you about technological disruption, right?
Sure.
And artificial intelligence. Since you're using a bit of that and you said that's one space that you see, how should people be acquiring such skills? Because typically the 4-year degree that you spoke of doesn't equip you to use artificial intelligence and start a business.
So I think the first thing anybody should do is actually, it's all free, it's in Coursera, it's in many other places, is to go look up machine learning and understand what machine learning is. I think a lot of people think it's very complicated. All it is, machine learning has existed from the 60s. All that's happened is computing power has gone up. So I think for everyone here, at least to have a base understanding of what AI does and what machine learning does is important. So I think the first advice I'd have for everyone here is go take a free course in Coursera on machine learning so that you at least know what this is about.
Sure. Tell us, what have you learnt about the Indian consumer? Let's take, typically are more girls shopping on your stores or boys?
So today, by the way, it's about 45% girls and 55% boys.
So boys are shopping more than girls?
Boys are shopping more than girls.
You know, why is it then that the joke is always on the girl or usually on the girl that, oh, look at how much shopping she's doing?
You know, at an individual level, actually the interesting factor why that's the case is there are more smartphones owned by boys than girls. Actually, if you look at the per shopper and how much they shop, actually each girl does shop more. The number of times they visit, the number of total shopping basket is all greater.
So they're bigger shoppers.
But they're bigger shoppers, but there are no more number of boy shoppers. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, but at least it takes away from this charge that girls are shopping all the time.
No.
You're using big data to suggest that boys are shopping in bigger numbers.
Absolutely.
Interesting. What are they looking for?
So I think they're looking for, in India, by the way, global trends come very quickly. So it's not like you can wait for a season, 2 seasons, and then bring it later, right? Because of the consumer internet and the fact that there are 490 million internet users or whatever that number is now, everybody is aware of every trend immediately. So first thing is, I think the Indian consumer, boy or girl, is basically looking for the latest in fashion. The second is, they are looking for it at a value, which is, I want it to be affordable, I want it to be fashionable, but I won't pay too much for it. The third, which is interesting, is, 5 years ago, brands used to be everything. So, people used to only shop for a certain brand, right? You like brand X or brand Y. Now, people are shopping much more for trends, saying this color is in trend, this type of dress is in trend, right? So, people are shopping on trends, which is very difficult.
Okay, so give us some sneak insights into all the numbers you've got at the back. We're in the autumn season of 2018. What are the colors that are in trend this year?
Rust, brown.
I see you're wearing rust, huh? Like
always, yeah. Rust and brown are very much in trend. By the way, apparently bohemian, which is a trend, is actually coming back this autumn winter, and you're actually seeing more of that. Um, Surprisingly, perhaps, black is back, especially, I think, as we get into both the party season and the winter season. So I think several of those are interesting.
Tell us, do you see a urban-rural divide? How are urban customers choosing products, and how is this different from what rural customers are picking up?
So today in Myntra, about 55% comes from beyond the top 30 cities, and 45% comes
55% comes from smaller parts.
smaller parts, and 45 comes from the top 30 cities. Actually, the surprising thing is there is almost no difference in what a rural shopper shops for. So if you just take a look, right, if you take average selling price, if you take the basket size, if you take what they buy, almost all of it is very similar between rural India and urban India. So what's interesting is most of the customers in rural India actually have awareness, but they have no access to brands. So the minute we provide access, people are actually buying the same things.
That's interesting. You're saying that in rural India as well, the products that are being picked are the same as those in the big cities?
Absolutely.
That's quite counterintuitive in many ways, because you'd assume that rural India has its own trends or its own fashion statement. You're saying they want to be like the big cities.
Absolutely. They want to be like the big cities, but they don't have the access. So even if you take ethnic clothes, right? You know, the W's and the Bibas, which are big brands in the main cities, actually do more business with us in the beyond the top 30 cities than they do here. So it's not just Western wear, right? Even ethnic. Everything, by the way, they want to be on trend and they want to be on the latest trend. And they actually have the money to buy.
Do you see online shopping to what extent surpassing or giving a run to brick and mortar stores? So how will brick and mortar brands be impacted by brands like yours?
So, you know, I think it's often overrated in terms of whether online, offline, etc., right? So today, by the way, fashion and lifestyle is a 100 billion market in India today. Online is 4 billion, right? It's 4% of the market. In most parts of the world, it's about 12 to 17%. So my sense is online will continue to grow. Second, if you look at malls in India, which is typically, if you think about organized retail doesn't extend beyond the top 30 cities because you just don't have the malls. Today, India, by the way, is 25% of the 100 billion is branded. 75% is unorganized. So my sense is it's less around what we will do to brick and mortar. It is more a natural evolution where people look for branded products. So the branded product market will continue to grow. Beyond the 30 cities, it will be uneconomical to continue to keep malls. Therefore, e-commerce will become big. My sense is e-commerce will become half of organized retail in the next 5 years.
That's a big opportunity then.
And that's a big opportunity.
Is there an opportunity also, for example, in saris and salwar kameezes? For example, why don't we have this one big national sari brand, which is, you know, take any big global marquee fashion brand comparable with that?
Have you been sitting in our strategy meetings? So I actually do think there's an opportunity, by the way, for creating a national sari brand and a national salwar kameez brand. Typically, by the way, we have not been able to create it for 3 big problems. The first, distribution is very expensive. So if you want to distribute all around India, the costs are very high. Second, when you market, and most of the market is offline, which is TV, print, it's very expensive to do. Third, typically you don't have consumer data around what is trending in each part of India. If you take any online player, we have all of those 3 pieces of data. So my sense is that's why we've been able to create national brands so quickly. Roadster, which is our largest private brand, it's not in the sari space, it's a denim brand, has grown to almost 700, 800 crores in 5 years, right? And that's almost unheard of. And the reason, by the way, that that's the case is because we're able to get to national reach very quickly, because we know what will trend and therefore what will sell, and we do all of our marketing digitally. We don't do any of the marketing offline. I think all 3 things really help us.
Have you ever made profits?
No, but I think if you take the overall market in general in e-commerce today, it's not a particularly profitable market. Fashion is among the highest profitable segments. So I would say that we would be probably the fastest to get to profitability. So we're getting there.
When we go to, say, a CII meeting, a lot of traditional legacy businesses are complaining, saying they're killing themselves, offering deep discounts. This is not sustainable. They'll burn all their cash and they'll sink.
So I think that's completely untrue, and it shows a lack of understanding of the consumer internet space. India, by the way, as a market will be, I think, either the second or third largest market in the next 10 years, right? Because after the US and China, we have the population, we have the consumer internet reach through phones. We also, by the way, in India, like many other things, we don't have a lot of organized retail beyond the top 30 cities. So I think e-commerce is very much here to stay. I think you'll build a very large e-commerce business. As you build up to scale, the profitability will come. And if you take a lifetime value of the consumer, there is certainly profitability. I think clothes and apparel will be among the first to get to profitability.
Okay. So, as we come to the concluding part of this conversation, we want you to give everyone tips here. You spoke of what they should do, what they should keep in mind as they set up a new startup. Talk to us now about how to prepare as they enter the job market. What are the kind of things to keep in mind so that over the next 10, 15, 20 years, they're successful, whether they do it for themselves, do it for somebody else, but successful?
I think I would start first with this concept of learnability. So I think go in with a mindset that you don't know everything and that every year you have to learn something new and a new skill. So the first 4 years, the first 6 years, the first thing you should look for in a job, in my view, is what maximizes your learning for the first 4 years. That could be a startup, that could be actually joining somebody. But in reality, you have to focus on how do I learn new skills. And the ability to continue to learn new skills is going to be really, really important. So that's one. I think the second thing to do is take risks, right? I think we are in a day and age where I think it's very easy if you tumble down to get back up and do things. Be confident that even if you actually fail a couple of times, you can get back up and do it. So I would encourage people to take more risks early on in their career because it really, actually, that's the best time to take a risk. I think it's much harder to take a risk when you're Rahul's age. It's much easier to take it when you're your age, right?
No, absolutely.
So I think those would be the two things. Look for learnability and situations that help you learn. Second, early on in your career, take a lot of risk because that's the best time to take risk and maybe the risks have inordinate payoffs, right?
So you're saying keep learning. What are you learning this year?
So I actually, by the way, took the machine learning course that I spoke about this year because while I understood AI and machine learning sort of conceptually, I'd never actually programmed in Python. So I actually took a Python programming course, which is quite interesting.
That's interesting. So despite being chief executive of a highly successful company and long hours, I suppose, you're also finding time to continuously learn.
Yep.
I think that's an important message you're giving to everybody.
Yeah, and I think you have to do it every week, Rahul, right? In my view, you can't say at the end of the year, I'll learn a lot. That never happens. So the real question for me is, can you take 3 to 5 hours every week to learn something? And if you keep that discipline going, I think it's cumulative because it also becomes a habit.
Interesting. You're also very fond of wines. How did this interest develop?
So the wine interest developed primarily because before Myntra, I used to be at McKinsey. One of my clients happened to be French, and he could actually sort of smell a wine and say where it's from. So we used to go out every evening, and he used to make me taste all these wines. This was 20 years ago, right? And
how often are you drinking wine nowadays?
Now much less often, unfortunately. I think the Myntra job sort of gets in the way.
That's the difference between being at McKinsey and being at
Myntra, yeah, absolutely. So I maybe once a week, but I got into wine that way. And the interesting thing is he started me collecting wine because he said you have to actually collect wine for each of your children. And you have to give it to them when they get married or whatever it is that they do. So I have lots of wine for each of my 3 kids.
So how much wine have you collected for your 3 children?
So, I have in the US a couple of thousand bottles of wine. So it's not something that I'm going to...
Couple of thousand bottles.
Yes.
So that's your legacy that you're going to just distribute amongst your children.
I tell everybody learnability and I give my kids wine. So I don't know, maybe,
No, but if you picked your wine well, which I'm sure you have, that wine could be worth a fortune.
It could be an investment, absolutely.
Do you see it as an investment?
So, as my wife often jokes, it's only an investment when you sell it. I haven't sold any wine yet. So I think they do appreciate as far as assets are concerned.
My curiosity is tickled. Typically, what would the appreciation be? Let's say you collect wine over 20 years.
So roughly, by the way, if you look at yields, it's about between 15 and 17% year on year.
Year on year.
So if you keep it, store it properly, and you buy Bordeaux wine, it's actually a pretty good investment.
There you go. So Myntra, Jabong, and then wines.
That's right.
So
right.
Even that is a smart investment.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to try and see if we've got some questions in the audience. And if somebody wants to ask a question about how to set up your own business or what to keep in mind in the Indian online space. So do we have a question? The gentleman in the green t-shirt has a question. Can a mic be taken across to him, please?
So basically, I was going through a newspaper article. It was written that in every 3 or 4 months, another startup takes over another startup. So if I am starting a startup, so what should put in my mind that I should my startup should last long, it should be successful.
So, I think you absolutely must think when you start a company to say, I'm building it for the next 10, 20, 30 years forever. Otherwise, by the way, the chances of a startup being successful are very low. I think a buyout can't be a strategy. So when you actually start something, you have to say, I believe in the big idea. I believe there's a consumer need for it, and I'm very passionate about it. So anytime you get into something, you should say, I'm here to do it for the rest of my life. Only that kind of passion and energy makes a startup successful.
Okay, that gentleman right at the back in the black shirt. Right at the back.
Hello.
Go on.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. I think we can hear you.
Go on, we hear you. Just ask the question.
Yeah, so my question is, we belong to a design field, and what should be our first step in this industry so that we are able to start up? Like, is there any scope for design students in India?
Absolutely. So I spoke about the brand accelerator. So in fact, still does, run something called the Myntra Fashion Incubator, where we take designers who are relatively new. Yeah. You actually spend a whole year trying to do a design and design a brand. And depending on which brand, by the way, we believe will be successful, you invest behind it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for designers. India is an unbranded market today. I'm only talking about clothes, but this could apply to furniture, this could apply to home, this could apply to any ideas, right? So there's a lot of branded products to be had. So I think it's a great idea to be a designer at this point. And I think I would say combine it with how do I think about brand building, and then you can really build a business out of it.
I had a smarter question. You should have said, I'm a budding designer. Can I have a line on
Yeah.
Myntra? Can I start my own? Can Myntra help me start a label? That would have been an interesting one. So we're out of time, Ananth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been an interesting conversation. And I'm really, interested in how many people say they're not just aware of your brand, but they're also shopping on it. So more power to you.
Actually, Rahul, can I ask one question?
Yes.
How many of you know Myntra now and will shop on Myntra?
See, he's trying to take care of the 30%.
All right, okay.
that's
I think it's now like closer to 80, 85. This progress.